What's going on in there?
No, don't kill him, please.
Knock him out.
No, that's okay. Oh, piece of shit.
Stop it, you're hurting him.
Absolutely. I think that's actually one of the most important tools to have is when, and I think that applies to music. I think that applies to literally anything in sound, is when to go quiet and how to do quiet effectively. I think that if you want something to sound huge, it needs to have something really quiet beforehand. And I think that Reklaw actually had so many great opportunities for that, where like, let's die down, let's get really dynamic, and then all of a sudden let's explode. And I think that also contributed to, like, I think that the way that you set it out allowed me to execute a really, like, sometimes almost jarring experiences as the listener. I think the way that you set that up was really intelligent.
That is true about post, is that you can give the credit, of course, to the editors, the mixers, and the composers, but they're always looking for opportunities that were left them, that they're you got to give me the ends. I can't do this on my own. And especially since our movie ends completely with no score for the entire last 5 minutes of it, which was kind of fun to, because not only with Reklaw did I want to always have some sort of cross-genre subversion of expectations. It's funny while it's scary, or it's it's tragic while it's hopeful and all that. But sound design wise, you're right that we always wanted to not let them get too comfortable. There was always some sort of talk, joke. Now a power tool's going off, power tool's down. Let's have a nice little moment. Power tool's back, and the end scene is really a complicated mix of not only do we as an audience not know what we're exactly supposed to feel, and we're like, that's funny and that's scary and that's hopeful, whatever. The mix doesn't really let them know. I don't have the best eyesight.
I keep on calling it Reklaw, even though you're being so polite and not correcting me each time.
So the first time you got a hold of this movie, I'm sure I contacted Allison and I was like, do this. And she was like, no, I'm not doing that movie. But Joe will do it. You saw the cut. What was your first initial reaction to it?
I actually just loved the whole concept of it. Like I got hooked with that, like right off the bat. I was very confused, honestly, with the first scene as I was watching it down, which I feel like is what you're going for.
Yeah, it's very mysterious. Yeah.
But then when I saw the moment where it takes the roofing,
the pill,
she roofies herself, and like I was like, what the hell am I about to watch? And like it was a ride from there. I don't usually, this is gonna sound so rude to say, so maybe don't put this in there, but like I don't always love the things that I'm working on. And that's just a matter of fact. But I was like, this is sick, like right away. So that was the rationale behind me like wanting to jump at this. I'm like, great content, great film, awesome premise, awesome room for sound design. So yeah, I hopped right on this.
Well, it was a big, we had to share the responsibilities on this one because it was too much. I couldn't even feasibly expect you to do all of the finding the sound effects and the Foleying and the dubbing and all that. So it was nice to have, I tried to do as much as I could to, supplement the process, but I don't know if I could not do that because I'm a little bit of a, I don't know if I'm able to direct as abstractly. Like it's not comfortable for me to be like, this feels a little, rushed. I'm more comfortable being like, let's make that doorknob, that noise longer so that it feels, because it kind of takes the middle workout, is that we could just talk about solutions between us. As a post-production person, you have to work with directors a lot. You don't get to do as much fuck off, I got this work that some other people get to do. And that's a definite skill, that you are pleasant and open the whole time. Whereas I would get very crabby being like, you don't know this isn't going to work, but I'll try it. But you don't know what you're talking about.
There's too much ego involved with it when it's like, hey man, I got this. I hate getting notes. Like, no, I'm right. Like, I don't care about whether or not I'm right or wrong in any of these situations. It's all about like, this is what you are hearing, and I'm trying to get your vision out the best. If you hired me for me to have my vision be what was 100% on here, then, it would be a different story, but I wouldn't approach it the same way. You know what I mean? It's like, let's find out what your intent is and let's find out the best way to execute that. I'm going to throw in my 2 cents along the way, but it's just all about not taking anything that you are doing as being sacred, like,
Yeah, it's a good
that's
point.
the
And
way to do this.
I don't think a lot of people realize how fast mixing can be, in that often you sit down with somebody and you hash out, at least not with something that's like episodic length or shorter, you hash it out like in these big sessions. And I think it sometimes feels like, well, of course it's just picking at it over time. And I'm like, really? No, they do a pass or two, and then you sit down with them and you like do these marathon sessions often. And you and I did one for the books. It was 14 hours where we had a deadline coming up for, I think, Sundance, and we just got on Zoom and just finalized the movie as much as we could and it wasn't that far along. There was a lot of like, we're figuring this out now for the first time. And that was crazy. You're a maniac, because I'm a maniac and I don't expect anyone to be such, to keep up with me. And I was like, this guy, he's not taking breaks. And my wife asked, it's like, did you guys take a meal break or anything? I go, I don't know if he even ate all day. I did not. I think I had a bite of something, but we didn't even stop to eat. We would just take little pee breaks.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it was insane.
I don't think we did. And that's just how it goes. Like, see, that's another thing. When you're on a roll, you just don't want to make it stop, because you're almost like worried about coming back to it and not having the same level of energy as you did before.
Yeah,
not
that's
like,
a good. That's a good point. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and it seems like in this job, you guys have a lot of output at Gramercy. You guys put out a lot of stuff that you have to kind of quell your perfectionism, urges, because you can get it great, but if you were to actually fuck with it and get it to 100% everything, it would take you 3 times as long. And I think working with other people helps me get over that, where I'm like, Joe likes it, I like it, okay, we're good. Whereas I would just go over and over again,
Yeah, it's like, you think that you're a perfectionist when you do this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
but most of the time, especially in what we're doing, because we're doing a lot of long form TV show, but we're also doing a lot of unscripted long form TV show shows. So because of that, and because of the deadlines that we're given, like on average, when we're working on TV, it's like we'll get like a 2-day turnaround to 3-day turnaround on a 42-minute long show. So if you wanted to be a perfectionist about that, you're not going to sleep for 72 hours. And like, that's obviously not going to happen. So that's the beginning of learning how to let things go. It's actually
a skill.
Yeah, it's actually cool, because when you work on projects more in the film world, where on average you'd say that deadlines are a little bit longer, you have a little bit more room to explore different outcomes. It's keeping it. I think that working in TV has made it like a really advantageous position to work in film, because it's like I kind of have that mindset of, I know how to call something done for right now, and like not to say this in a negative way, but like this moment is good enough. Like I could spend here, and even if I think it could get to 100%, if it's at 98% right now, the difference being 2%, that becomes not worth it to explore that extra 2% sometimes. And finding out where that cutoff point is something that, that to me determines whether or not you're good at being a mixer, because you could be amazing and come out with the best sounding thing of all time. That'd be awesome. But if you can't turn something around and complete projects, then you're not going to have a long career in this.
But I think that there's something alive about a movie that isn't exactly the way you wanted it to be, but that you had challenges, you got as close as you can, and you can feel the electricity of the ambition of it, and somebody striving. It's not somebody comfortably like, I can do this in my sleep. And a lot of my favorite directors' work is when it seemed to be a little out of their hands, either experience or budgetary wise. And then these directors like Tim Burton and Robert Rodriguez, when they get like the money they want, I go, oh, you're making garbage. You should never have had this much control. And that is in every aspect, from score to acting to all that. There's this organic roughness to being like, we have to move on. Since COVID, you've had to do all this remotely, and I'm wondering what that changes the workflow. Is there less interaction with the director or client, and it's more in these specific chunks, or are most of your notes in emails now and you don't have to keep track? Like, what's the difference?
On average, I would say that it's actually it's an interesting question, because whether or not something is actually a net positive or a net negative in
Mhm.
relation to also what I've been preferring, it's
Okay.
very different. So like, because we've been sending out mixes virtually, people have been able to listen them, study them, take notes on them, relay their notes to us, and then us address them, or by doing them sometimes over Zoom.
Mhm.
It's like, it's effective and it's quicker. It allows us to generally output things quicker than if they
Mhm.
were to come in person. We were to spend 8 hours doing something. Generally, someone's not going to spend the same amount of time uh, on something when it's remote. So
Yeah.
in terms of, does it actually feels like it creates less work for us to do when
Nice.
it's like
Yeah.
that. But at the same time, I don't know that that's necessarily a positive thing, because a lot of the times people are listening in not ideal environments. They're listening on their iPod headphones, or they're listening on their
Yeah.
laptop speakers, or their TV speakers without a sound system, and it makes it so that when I'm sending something to a client, it's not only is it, hey, I hope you enjoy the work that I've done on this. It's also like, I want to know your thoughts, because you've become at this point another opinion on this from
Yeah.
like somebody that's not just completely absorbed within the sound of it. They especially, that's why I always find that, like, your average listener is actually such a good gauge of
Mhm.
things, because it's like,
Yeah.
did anything stick out to you that was weird? Did you notice anything that was not good about the sound? That's like your barometer for whether or not something is a good or bad sound mix to
Yes.
me. People that were doing the reviews are also not generally sound people to begin with, but putting
Mhm.
them not in the studio with me on, like nice fancy Genelec sound systems. It's like, I feel like I am losing objectivity a little bit easier through that. So it's like, you have to challenge
Mm.
yourself and create other solutions for that. I'm going to go and listen to it in my living room off my crappy speakers. I'm going to throw on AirPod headphones and try to be as objective as this is possible. I'm going to try and, watch this on and off while doing my dishes at home to see
And
if anything's jumping out at me, and you find ways to work around it.
I was
So
surprised at
yeah,
how, yeah, my headphones would often be more unforgiving. Even my earbuds would be, I could hear, ramps and stuff like that. Not ramps, I don't know.
rives.
Yeah. And, and then I would listen to it on my laptop speakers and I'd be like, this is fine. I need this, whatever.
Generally, if something could be making it to broadcast, it's already,
Mm,
like translating a theatrical to a broadcast mix. You have really strict guidelines on things for broadcast, and not for theatrical. So
interesting. Yeah.
um,
Huh.
yeah, and one of the things that makes it really interesting is that they actually shrink the amount of dynamic range that you have, in terms of like what numbers you're allowed to deal with, like
Oh.
how loud you're allowed to get something to go and how quiet you're allowed to get something to go. There is actual dictation, like there's rules
I,
about
s-
that.
I swear
Um,
commercials are breaking those goddamn rules because I watch it, we all watch TV and the commercial comes on. I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I remember
yeah,
you mixed the trailer for anyone seen that. Great job with that. It's amazing. And
thanks.
that was one of the ones actually where I gave you some initial directions and you completely went away from it because you just knew better. And I was like, yeah,
I work on a lot
that
of trailers.
that was better. Okay, I did not know what I was talking about there, but it was and you nailed it. But you usually mix the trailers and ads and all that sort of things a little bit more loud and a little more eye catching, right?
Yeah, trailers actually also have some guidelines, not nearly as strict as broadcast goes, but
Yeah.
trailers do. There's measurements where it's like, at the very end you're supposed to be hitting this number,
Yeah.
that like the whole rest of the audio world has decided that's a good number for this. So you try and make it hit that number, and but the
Yeah.
theater does not have the same at all.
I'm all about standardization. I hate that when I color something, it looks different on every single screen. That I'll look at it on my iPhone versus my wife's iPhone. I'm like, how? This is ridiculous. Really, what is great about learning a little bit about sound mixing as a filmmaker is knowing what is possible and what you can ask
Mm,
for. Because I think a lot of people go, well, I can't do anything about that. And I was like, there are things you cannot do anything about. And we've all hit that where it's like, you got to re-record that. Don't be foolish.
right.
But so much so, especially now with Isotope, that, and for anyone who doesn't know about isotope, it will convert your waveform into a visual thing that you can highlight a bird chirp and remove and stuff. It has changed the game on what you can get away with, and how your trash sound can be fixed up, which was on my last film, and even more, because I would film in a bunch of alleys, and we would have, I couldn't control air conditionings, or homeless people yelling at each other or whatever, and there were so many shots that I was surprised that I could keep the sound on, or at least the base of the dialogue. And we did replace some sound, though, just out of wanting it to be as good as possible. It's especially when it has to be quiet, like we were talking about earlier. One of our quietest scenes is when Melissa wakes up in her room and she's in the corner. We did do a dub on that, which I don't think anybody knows. It was so good with the, and we do our best with editing.
She did a fantastic job with that, though.
She did a great match, because she actually did that ADR. A lot of people use ADR when they just mean kind of recording, like, what would you call that when it's not ADR? It's just dubbing, I guess, or yeah. So a lot of people do like wild lines or whatever, but in a studio,
right?
And so a lot of people, when you re-record the lines, you edit them in. But she did that. She's in Lebanon right now, and so I had to call her on the phone, find her. And Lebanon is in the middle of a crisis at the time. They just had that big explosion in the harbor, and they had civil unrest. There were protests against the government, and they were shutting down streets. And I was like, okay, can you take a cab to a little studio and record for the movie, please? And so she has to do this weird political thriller to get to the studio, and then and then her and a dude are just watching the movie, and he's recording her, and she's just kind of matching it, and I'm on the phone on mute in her ear, so I can hear what she's doing. I can't see anything, but I can hear what she's doing, and then, knowing the scene, I just have to direct her on, could you, when you say that line, a little bit more tired, or whatever, and go with the emotion. And so I could direct her, and then she would put me on speaker, and I would talk to her in a recorder, and he would monitor it for me. It was the craziest way to record anything. And then from there, I kind of adjusted her ADR, and from there you mixed it to make it all sound good. And that was definitely an instance where it's like, we should really ADR this, because we're gonna it's zoomed in on her breathing, it's all we got, and it turned out good.
Making those judgment calls is tough, you know what I mean? Because also you want to, most people are just so attached to what happened on set, like you chose that take in the edit because that was the take that you wanted to use, and you want to keep what made that take special, and a lot of that has to do with the exact delivery that the actor decided to do it in. So I understand that.
And
but,
I'm all about, if you still dub it and it's still not as good, go with the diminished version of the what do you call it, production audio, because and you said if the magic's there in the take, we gotta follow that. And luckily we were kind of able to do half and half. Half of the stuff I dubbed, I threw out, and half of it I kept, and I was like, okay. But I need that peace of mind that I didn't want to live my whole life going, could we get that dialogue clearer there? I tried, it was garbage, forget it.
Especially for such an important moment. I mean, that really sets up what the entire back half of this half of this film was.
And that was the part where the audience was most likely to get bored, because you're right that the movie has a lot of has a good pace, and that's the one part that I make them excruciatingly just stop and watch her. And I was like, all they have is the audio, there's no music. And also a part of that, though, as a director, I'm always talking about, you can't bore your audience ever. And even the first two shots of the movie in the RV, which are the most kind of low key, I'd say that's the part I make them be one of the more patient times, is when it's just that tracking shot in the RV, because I can't even see anyone's face. What are we doing here? But I go, the second that they are familiar with the hum, we introduce the face. The second they're familiar with the face, let's introduce the music, and then the dialogue, and you always want to add an element or whatever. And sound design also has a lot to do with that, where if you can
energy management, and
you can sense you're boring your audience a little, it's like, okay, let's add a honk or something from the open window or something right there. And I don't think a lot of directors realize that, where they go, you're not stuck with this scene being not the way you want it to be. You could save it in the mix. You could save it at the very last second.
You can, but it also, and tying this quickly back to what you were saying before about, with what the advantages of even having RX can do is that saving too much for the mix also has overall created the mindset that this can be done in the mix.
Yeah.
You know, and that it is a dangerous line to cross. But you're absolutely right. Like, you know, sometimes the best way to look at it is like, it's not going to save anything in particular, but it definitely can enhance.
Can make it work. Yeah, it makes it work.
Yeah. You know, it's not going to make something bad all of a sudden become good. So that's for sure.
Yeah, and I will say, if you can close your eyes and listen to your movie and it's still captivating, you've won. Like, that's all. And if people are like, well, you got to really be watching it, I go,
is that something people do? Where they close their eyes and watch it?
I don't. I mean, I actually, no, I think I have listened to one of the bounces you sent me.
Cool.
Listen to, but it really is like the movie's on rails from there. If like the sound sounds good, because that's how I edit now. When I was, you know, when a lot of people start out when I was in high school and stuff, and I would edit my movies, I would wait for moments visually where I'd go, okay, the character sits down here and the moment's done, I'll cut there and then they'll begin.
Right.
And I realized you can do whatever the fuck you want if the dialogue and the sound effects are timed in a great rhythm and musically. A lot of people talk about the pace of my movie, which I really appreciate. They go, oh, it's got such a great pace. And I go, it's because I muscled it in the edit so that everything, you know, everything felt like it should land audio wise where it should. Right. Especially with the dialogue, I would, you know, I'd take takes from, I'll Frankenstein the hell out of the movie if I have to. I'll take, you know, somebody's line if they have, you know, 3 bits, I'll put them together 3 different takes and put it under there if it has the right rhythm, you know, like that line that Bill says where he goes, would you, it's crass, but when he says, would you please shut up, you stupid fucking whore? He had, that's actually 2 different lines, but it had to be, would you please shut up, you stupid fucking whore? And he didn't do it quite right in any of them. And I go, but I have the pieces and it fits. And then the movie works. So I would give that advice to any starting director or editor. I would go, rhythmically make the sound feel like music, and then the movie just works perfectly. And I think a lot of people's favorite movies growing up as kids, something like Back to the Future or something that you watched over and over again, that is rewatchability, is music-esque sound design. And you'll feel the slog if it's not there. If it's like we're letting the movie just breathe and be real, I go, that's a one watcher. You can get through that one time. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's so important to have new elements to be able to focus in on every time. Definitely, man. Yeah,
when you were working on this mix, what are some of the parts that you were the most proud of, that you were like, oh, I fucking nailed that thing?
Dude, the fight scenes.
It's so good. You did such a good job with that.
We spent so long really doing that. I think what was the coolest was I think I spent a full day and a half before I even got on with you. Yeah. And I threw a million things out there, like just to have them. Literally like every single moment that I can think that could possibly have made a sound. And like and that's generally actually how I do a lot of this too, is I go with like an insane amount of hyper realism. And then I subtract. Yeah, I think that's the most efficient way to go about doing this, because if you're constantly having to pull new sounds and create new sounds out of, you know, thin air during a session, that's observed by the director, I think that generally makes things take forever. Whereas if you just throw everything you got there and then start taking stuff away, I think that's probably the best way to do it. There's also so many sounds that you can, you know, you pulled this for this moment here, but like, you know, the director says, oh, you know, we should make this happen in this other spot. You can repurpose so many sounds from, you know, pulling a million different things together. I think that was a big part of why this fight scene turned out good, is, you know, the pre-work that was done to do that. But then, you know, the collaborative effort of you and I getting on there and piecing together, I think, is what really made that scene be like, and to me, really memorable.
Oh, it hits. Yeah. And I forgot that, that we both kind of have that theory where I dubbed the shit out of everything. And then we totally took out, like, okay, I don't need to hear every foot scuff or every time they touch a thing. Yeah. But that was interesting because it needed to be full. And so we did fill it out, and then we would just carve it. That was so fun. You know, we just go through, we go right there. It's a little too much commotion. And there are other moments where we go, it's a little dead there. Can we get some foot noise back up in there? And that was really so fun. It does make it seem instantaneous when you've really just done a shit ton of prepreparation, scooting it all in. And I'm still finding little things you did where I'll listen to a scene, I'll go, he added that. I never noticed in the restaurant scene. She moves a little, and he added a little thing for her shoulder, or elbow or whatever. You're sneaking it in on me.
You should see the timeline, man. It's a wall. It is a wall of sound effects. A lot of which have been muted out, or a lot of them, the volume of them is almost to the point where you don't even notice that it's there anymore. But there's a lot of subconscious material that's in there for sure.
And that was great. That was great that you did, is you would keep things there and you would mute them instead of delete them, which is something I need to be better about, because we would be working on it and I go, wasn't there something in the production audio, which we had already moved away from? You'd be like, it's always there. If you need to hear it, it's always there. And you'd always pull it back out, and we could grab little bits from the production audio. It was kind of funny doing the Foley though, because certain parts of the movie, like there was carpet and I just didn't have any carpet anywhere. So I went to my RV that we bought for this movie that's just in storage in a open air thing. And I would just kind of do the little shifting around on the carpet when she's waking up. And then I'd give you the sound and there would be cars, driving by, and you'd have to do it. And it's such a sweaty experience for me to do Foley, because I'm always like, okay, I'm going to hang a bunch of blankets in my kitchen to kind of muffle the sound. I'm turning off the air conditioning, and it's summer in Texas, and I'm just sweating in there, just making a little knife slide noise over and over again. Yeah, but I love Foley because it's kind of acting, where you go, and it's a little musical, and I'm sure you do some Foley too, where you kind of go, oh, this needs to have kind of a bra-pa-ta to it, you know what I mean? This foot noise. And one I definitely felt that with was when Bill throws me for the first time off of the kitchen island, my feet kind of bump and make a little ba-doom. And I remember just taking shoes and just constantly trying to find the right rhythm to it. And that's one of the fun parts about sound design, because finding sound effects, you do that a lot. And I know you and Allison, you have to often kind of traipse through it'll just be a sound file of people making, like cutlery noise, and you have to find the right little clink. And
absolutely.
And likewise with dubbing, I don't really think they realize how many takes I'm really taking here going, that's not the head thump on the pillow that I'm looking for, Right. It takes a while, and that's why I think the sound design took a couple months, actually, didn't it? Didn't we, even though it's only a 12-minute movie, I think we picked at it. I would have to take some time and get back to you, because I would take a whole week of Foley. Yeah. What would be some advice that there's a lot of directors who haven't gotten to really work with a legit sound designer mixer like yourself before? What would be some advice when they're going into their production that you want to give them?
To directors specifically is probably
just filmmakers. Yeah.
Filmmakers. Yeah. Decide what it is what kind of role that you want the mixer or the sound designer to have, whether or not you want them to run with it, whether or not you want to be, calling a lot of these shots, and just be clear with what that intent is from the beginning. I think that kind of sets the stage for how your mixer is going to approach this is going to be a lot different based on that. So kind of just know what type of workflow that you want to have, express that to your mixer, and then be prepared that if you want to be the one that's coming up with the majority of the ideas for sound design and things like that, then be as detail oriented as you possibly can, and give the most direction that you possibly can so that someone can follow it. I think the worst case scenario is if you want to be really hands-on and you really want to come up with a lot for it, and then you don't do any of that work ahead of time. You let someone go through a couple of passes through something, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, now we need to go back to square one again. That's the most nightmare situation that you can come up with. So if you're going to take on this really, and this is why I appreciate you, is that I feel like you were a lot of best of both worlds. But you really did know what you wanted for a lot of this too. And when it came down to our spotting session, when it came down to our first round of notes, when we first started listening to things back, you were just so like, no, I want this there. Like you knew exactly what you were going for. And that allows me to be able to read off that and build off of that. So just knowing what you want is probably the most important thing.
And that is an advantage of the remote stuff with COVID, is that it forces the directors to give clear notes with time code, and they got to do their homework, because the worst thing is you have a conversation with somebody on the phone or something, and you say 10 things, and you watch the what they've done, and they incorporate about 4 or 5 of the things you mentioned. And so I've gotten in the habit of being like, it's kind of nice to just spreadsheet everything. The composer, the mixer, the, you know, everyone.
Nice for everyone.
Yeah.
Nice for everyone. I get to see that on my side. I can have that spreadsheet right next to my timeline here, and I can be like, okay, no, let's check this off the list, check this off the list, check this off the list. It's kind of a great way to work in that regard, you know.
Some of my favorite things that we did were where we had already really gone through all the notes, and it was just an overall vibe that I would be like, this scene just needs to have a little more elegance, or a little more, the scene needs to have a little more mystery, or a little more, you know, a little more whatever. And that's when you can really, and I could trust you that I was like, I can get in there and get it as close as I can, but it's still going to have some, you know, spots on the carpet you need to hammer down that you just need to pass it to your mixer and go, make it feel romantic, you know, or whatever. Right. And that was always fun. And it always worked. It was always like, he knows, he's got his taste.
Using those words though to some people might present some challenges though.
Right.
I do just want to say this might be more of a note towards advertising or towards like short form TV or something like that. But when people say like, I really want this to pop, or like things that are just like generic like that, it becomes like, that doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
I would say only go to that if you've done all the technical.
Exactly.
That, and then you've exhausted all the technical solutions. You're like, I just need you to hear it and give me your 100%. Opinion. Yeah, I think it'd be really important for directors to kind of understand that a lot of their notes are baffling and are like, what is that?
Because you have something in your head, and you're trying to get that out of someone, whether that be in the sound mix, whether that be with the actor, and like they can't be inside your brain, they can't feel your intent. So being able to clearly be able to express that and to share that with someone else in a way that they're specifically going to understand is a really, really important tool to have.
So much of filmmaking on your end and my end is communication, and how to try different words to try and unlock what you're trying to get them to understand, you know, and it can get abstract and get technical, but it is so interesting, especially if you have and with a cast, they all have a different brain, that this works for this actor, this works for that one. And working with you, it was interesting going, after a while, we got in the groove of, okay, this means that to them, you know?
Yes.
Like,
Yes, that's a harder thing to do, overall. Like being able to communicate effectively, that's not something that can really be taught so much. You kind of have to just figure it out as you go. Here's a really easy tip though, is that, and you were not one of these, so thankfully enough.
Okay, good.
But there are a lot of people out there, a lot of filmmakers, that just because you see something happen doesn't mean that you want that to be louder. Because if you keep on saying, make that louder, make that louder, make that louder, eventually everything is now loud. You've done nothing but like bring everything up. And that's something that happens a lot. And it makes, as a mixer, us have to say, okay, are they saying that they really want this sound effect louder, or are they saying that they want the music quieter? Both of those two things are acceptable answers.
It really is about ratio. Yeah, you're right.
100%. And just knowing what you're communicating to a mixer, like, you know, and that's such a common thing as you go through something. Turn that up, turn that up, turn that up, turn that up. And then to a non-experienced mixer, they might actually do that, and that's not what you actually want.
you just mime it to up. Great, thanks. Yeah.
Shout out to Dangerous, which is, you know, the makers of our monitor controllers. They actually have a button on their monitor controller that's called the PPI button. I'm gonna blow up a bunch of mixers' spots right now, but it's called the producer pacification indicator. Which is a fancy word for, put this on and it's going to do nothing, but I turned on a light, so you're going to think that something happened. You really want this to happen? You really want this to happen? You push this button in. How about now? Is that better? Or is this better? And it literally does nothing.
Yeah.
I've yet to use that.
That's the greatest thing I've ever heard.
I've always wanted to. I'm just so afraid that I'd get called out for that. Like, I know what that is. I know exactly what you're doing right there.
Yeah, that would be I need a new mixer. He pushed the button on me. Yeah, the
Yep.
but I do like what you said about just because you see it. I mean, a lot of things, if you see it, even if it's there a tiny bit, it's almost phantomly there in your head, whether there's noise at all. So I'm often worried about noises that are what do you call it? That I guess seem missing. Where I go, sometimes we talked about that a lot. Where I go, I don't want to actually hear this. I just can tell it's not there. So can you just put it there enough that I cannot tell it's missing? And it was usually easy stuff like, you know, like Lance grabbing her shoulder. I go, it's silent, and it seems like he's miming, but I just need something there in the back of our minds. And it's it's so fun having those levels of like there, but you can't tell, there, and taking focus. And usually kind of the dialogue is at normal. It's really music that I think is always tricky because it's beautiful, it sounds great, and you don't want to not feature it. But I'm always tragically, you know, kind of come to the realization, because I'll watch these movies that have these cues I love, and I'll go, man, they're really burying this, you know, this great cue that I love in this score that I hear on the CD. But then when I get into the movie, I keep on having to push it down to make, because you'll feel a moment, because I think directing in all ways, and sound mixing especially, is like you're doing a puzzle box and you're moving little elements until it clicks and starts to hum and opens and the scene is good now. And so much of it is like is playing with the music, in at least our movie's case, where it's like just a little bit down and then suddenly the movie clicks. And unfortunately it was always often lower than I was hoping, where I'm like, I really do need to turn this down. This sucks. But the dialogue is tough. Really carrying the movie, so you gotta let it happen.
It's tough because, like, you know, we're coming from a place of, you know, we want to make this a creative thing, and we also have to remember that the people that are going to be, you know, like consuming this media, need to be able to, you know, not just look at it like, oh yeah, this score is beautiful, so therefore I'm going to make the score really featured here. But like, chances are they might not be paying attention to the score at all right there, and remembering that the dialogue here is the most important moment.
I've also found that the gaps in the score that are covered by dialogue or sound effects, they kind of finish the score in their head. That they're kind of like, if it's interrupted, they have these tracks continuing on. They're not like, where's that third note? They know in the Indiana Jones theme, if they can't hear every note, they finish it anyways in their head.
Exactly.
If Indy's yelling over it, you know. And I have started to notice that where a lot of, and that goes with writing, with everything, where I go, the audience is making so many assumptions that you don't need to really telegraph to them. And especially with writing, I go, if you see a guy sleeping on the couch and in his own home with his wife, what do you assume? Oh, I don't know, his marriage's on the rocks, he might get a divorce. Great, then you don't need any lines about that. If he's sleeping on the couch because he farts too much and his wife is like, I love you, but you're terrible smelling, you need to explain that if that's a plot point.
That's a great metaphor right there.
But it's exactly. But there's so much with every part of filmmaking where I go, the audience, if the audience's first assumption is what it is, then you're good. Okay, well, it was great talking with you, and I know you're so busy. Man. You work so much. I'm surprised you don't get sick of clicking on that little 3-button mouse all damn day. But
man, there are 15 buttons on this. Excuse me.
Holy shit! Truly? Holy crap!
And 15, and they all actually do something.
You're like, I don't have a keyboard anymore. That's stupid.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure to sit down talking to you. It's also really fun to do it like, you know, now that a little bit of time's passed,
we get cool to kind of look back at it. Now that we're not exhausted anymore.
Like, exactly.
Let him go. What are you doing?
What is he doing? He didn't bring that rifle for us, lady.
I think he may have had regrets about sparing you earlier.
Goddamn right.